Let me make one thing clear from the beginning. I am not against kindness, nor do I deny the power of empathy. These are noble human qualities, the very foundation of healthy relationships and thriving communities. But what I want you to confront today is not authentic kindness. It's the compulsive habit of people-pleasing. When you give up your personal boundaries, your time, and your mental health just to keep the peace, that is not kindness. That is a misdirected survival reflex, and it's wreaking havoc on your nervous system, scattering your focus, and quietly sabotaging the real potential you were meant to reach in this life. Let's examine this from the lens of neuroscience. The human brain was not built to please everyone. It was designed to survive, to focus, to pursue goals with precision and intensity. But when you say yes to every request, every opinion, every expectation, especially those that conflict with your true feelings, your brain doesn't register that as virtuous. It interprets it as a threat. It believes you're under attack from all directions. The pattern of chronic people-pleasing is not just an emotional issue. It leads to persistent stress, elevates cortisol levels, and keeps your nervous system in a state of hypervigilance, exhaustion, and mental fragmentation. You try so hard to be liked, to never upset anyone, but the price you pay is this: you lose yourself. Bit by bit, day after day. You are not born to be someone's emotional cushion. You're not here to be the background character in everyone else's story. You are here to build something meaningful. Your health, your vision, your discipline, your identity, and your unique purpose. And to build those things, you need boundaries. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire and evolve, doesn't come from comfort. It comes from deliberate discomfort. From those moments when you dare to say no to what no longer serves your path. Each time you do that, you send a clear signal to your prefrontal cortex: this matters more. You reclaim control over your life instead of letting it be hijacked by the demands of others. Many people ask me, isn't putting yourself first selfish? And I always respond, can you save anyone if you're out of oxygen yourself? No, you need to breathe first so you can help others sustainably. The truth is this: when you try to be good to everyone, you're not creating peace. You're erasing yourself. You suppress your real needs. You avoid necessary conflicts. You silence your inner voice. But here's the miracle. The moment you stop pretending and start living with authenticity, you begin to heal. You sleep better. You think clearer, you focus deeper, you grow stronger, and people respect you more. Because now your body and your behavior are finally aligned. And from here, the real journey begins. There's something most of us were never taught. Every time you pretend to agree just to keep the peace, every time you force a polite smile when you feel nothing inside, every time you say it's okay while a storm rages within, you're not performing an act of kindness. Your brain doesn't interpret it that way. It sees it as a dangerous response and immediately activates your survival alert system. This is not a metaphor, it's a neurological fact. When your behavior contradicts your true emotions just to avoid conflict or to maintain an image, you trigger the brain's social threat detection system, also known as the salience network. The brain begins scanning the environment for danger: judgmental glances, cold body language, subtle signs of rejection. It doesn't care that you're trying to smooth things over. It only understands that you are not safe. And when this happens over and over again, day after day, a loop of chronic stress begins to form. Cortisol rises, your heart beats faster, your stomach tightens, the autonomic nervous system shifts into a state of sustained low-grade alertness. You can't relax, you struggle to sleep, or wake up in the middle of the night with a vague sense of anxiety. You can't focus, you constantly feel stretched thin, even when nothing particularly serious is happening. Sound familiar? If you've experienced any of these symptoms, try responding in the comments below. Press 1 if you've ever forced a smile to avoid upsetting someone, even when you felt suffocated inside. Press 2 if you've ever said yes when every part of you wanted to scream no. you're not alone. And the truth is, there is nothing wrong with you. What's happening is that you've been going against yourself for far too long. The behavior of people-pleasing does not stem from kindness. It is a survival reflex rooted in fear. Specifically, the amygdala, the brain's fear processing center, perceives social situations as if they were threats. That's why you don't run, you don't resist, but instead you fawn, you smile more, agree more, shape shift to meet others' expectations. But deep inside, you know you're losing yourself, one small compromise at a time. And here lies the real danger. If you continue operating this way long enough, your brain begins encoding it as a default safety strategy, which means that every time there's a chance of conflict, you automatically shrink, lower your voice, compromise, not because you consciously choose to, but because you've lost your power to choose. Is that how you've been living? Have you ever felt like you've become too accommodating to the point where others start taking you for granted, no longer respecting your boundaries? If so, know this: it's not your fault. It's the result of a nervous system that's been exhausted from pretending to be calm while internally breaking apart. But you don't have to live that way anymore, because once you become aware of what's happening inside, you can choose differently. And all change begins with one clear awareness, one moment of pause, one honest word, one intentional response. Ironically, what you believe to be safe, agreeing to keep the peace, giving in to avoid conflict, nodding just so others won't be upset, is exactly what's weakening your nervous system and your brain's adaptive capacity day by day. Because the brain does not grow through comfort. It grows through intentional friction, through the moments when you dare to act against old patterns and live true to yourself. Every time you nod to something you don't genuinely agree with, you're not only giving up a chance to live by your values, you're also unintentionally suppressing the brain's natural mechanism for adaptation. Instead of building a new neural pathway that leads to growth, you're reinforcing an old rut: resignation, silence, avoidance. Each time, your brain learns one simple message: what I feel inside matters less than external approval. And that is the tragedy, because once people-pleasing becomes a reflex, the brain stops asking, is this what I really want? And simply reacts in the way that causes the least trouble. Over time, you lose the ability to respond flexibly to life's situations. You're no longer choosing freely because every choice is filtered through the fear of rejection. That's when neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire and grow, becomes frozen in a haze of submissiveness. Imagine a sophisticated machine that requires new data in order to update, adapt, and upgrade, but instead of feeding it real-life experience as feedback, from expressing your opinion, from trying, failing, and adjusting, you're only giving it a loop of programmed behaviors driven by how to be liked. And then you wonder, why do I feel so exhausted, unmotivated, and directionless? The answer is not that you're inadequate. The answer is you've stopped evolving and you didn't even notice. You don't have to become rigid or rude to let go of false politeness. You just need to begin asking yourself, does this action truly reflect who I am? And if the answer is no, then give yourself space to be silent, to observe, to choose again. That's when your brain has the chance to activate a new adaptive mechanism where acetylcholine and dopamine begin to release, signaling this is worth remembering. And that is how you reclaim identity. Not by shouting, not by changing the world in grand, noisy ways, but in quiet, conscious moments when you choose to live authentically just once and then again. It is in those moments when you sit with discomfort, no longer people-pleasing out of habit, no longer shrinking out of fear, but instead stand firmly in your truth, that you stop merely surviving and begin leading. your life. And that is what every path of personal growth requires. One mindful interruption of an old pattern to open the way for a new way of being. What confuses many people is the outward similarity between kindness and niceness. Both can appear as a smile, a nod, or a gesture of concession, but their underlying nature is completely different. One comes from intention, steadiness, and conscious choice. The other from the fear of being rejected, judged, or misunderstood. Kindness, genuine kindness, always originates from a strong inner core, a place where you know exactly who you are, what you're doing, and why you're choosing to act that way. It is a decision, not a reaction. It arises from the rational part of the brain, the area that allows you to weigh, empathize, and deliberately choose generosity without compromising your boundaries. Niceness, on the other hand, the reflexive kind, is an avoidance mechanism. It comes from the fear center of the brain, the amygdala, which keeps whispering, "Don't upset anyone, because if they dislike you, you'll be in trouble," and you obey, unconsciously. You smile at things that aren't funny. You agree with opinions that make you feel stifled. You hold a smile when your heart wants to speak up, but you don't speak because you're afraid. The problem is, you can fool others, but you can't fool your body. Your nervous system always knows the difference between an action rooted in truth and one driven by fear, and it responds accordingly. When you live in alignment, it stabilizes. When you live in contradiction, it destabilizes. Every cell, every neural signal, every heartbeat, every breath reflects that internal dissonance. It's heartbreaking that many people believe always being agreeable, always being sweet, always eager to please is a sign of kindness, when in fact, it's the fastest way to lose your inner voice and become a blurry version of yourself in your own life. Kindness doesn't make you smaller, it makes you more grounded. But fake pleasantness does the opposite. It makes you forget what you once wanted, once needed, once dreamed of. And worse, you start to believe that this is all I've ever been. If you've ever lived that way, you don't need to blame yourself. You just need to begin waking up. Because the moment you realize, I'm acting out of fear of rejection, not out of a loving choice, that is the beginning of truth. And from there, you can choose again. Choose to speak up when it matters. Choose to stay silent when that is your strength. Choose to walk away when something no longer serves you. Choose kindness, not the need to be nice all the time. Because in the end, true respect never comes from pleasing everyone. It only comes when you're brave enough to live honestly, even if that means not everyone will be happy. And the most beautiful thing is, once you begin to live authentically, the relationships that remain will be the ones that truly nourish you and reflect the real value of who you are. We often think that if we behave gently enough, nicely enough, pleasantly enough, everyone will like us, everyone will want to keep us in their lives. And that will naturally lead to good relationships. But the truth is the opposite. Relationships that are sustained by pretending to get along, by nodding just to avoid upsetting others, by conversations where you never say what you truly think, can never become real relationships. They are merely prolonged negotiations between two people, where one person keeps shrinking themselves to fit the other's expectations. And when you live like that long enough, you eventually forget where your true boundaries lie, what your real emotions are, and what inner voice should have been heard, first of all, by you. That pleasant behavior, when you look closely, doesn't create connection. It is submission disguised as a smile. You nod. You try to seem okay. You smile to ease tension, but no one really knows what you're thinking, and no one stops to ask whether you're truly okay, because you've trained them to believe that you're always okay. When you can't show your truth, those around you never get the chance to truly connect with you. They don't know what you need, what you want, or what you're struggling with. And so the relationship turns into a surface level game where people only interact with the mask you've built, not with the real person inside. And worse yet, you begin to devalue your own worth. When you are always the one who gives unconditionally, always the one who yields, always the one who lets it go, your brain starts to encode that behavior into a belief: I'm only worthy of love when I don't inconvenience anyone, don't burden anyone, don't ask for anything. And that's how you lose the ability to love yourself in a healthy way. You give so much to others, but become emptier inside. So take a moment and look closely. How many relationships in your life right now are truly healthy, where you can speak your truth without fear of being judged? How many people in your life love you for who you really are, not for the agreeable version you've learned to present? And if that number is smaller than you hoped, it's not because you're unworthy of love. It's because you've never shown the world your real self clearly enough. True connection can only begin with sincerity. And sincerity cannot coexist with pretending. To build deep relationships, you must dare to not always be pleasant. Dare to disagree. Dare to say what you truly think. Dare to set boundaries. Dare to stand in discomfort to protect the truth. Because only when you dare to live authentically can the right people truly enter your life and stay. Not because you are pleasing to the eyes, you're pleasing to the mind, or pleasing to the heart, but because you are at peace with yourself. There are seemingly small, ordinary moments in a day when someone asks you to take on more work even though you're already exhausted. When an invitation comes that makes you uncomfortable. When someone says something that contradicts your values, but you stay silent to keep the peace. And it's in these very moments that you quietly give away pieces of your power over your own life. It may sound simple, but in truth, it is a silent negotiation between your true will and your fear of being judged. And if you repeat this every day, your brain will gradually learn to prioritize short-term safety over long-term growth. When you say yes unconsciously, you're not just spending time or energy, you're teaching your nervous system a dangerous message, that your inner voice doesn't matter. But here's the miracle. The moment you say no at the right time, even just once, you're opening up a new path, because every time you choose to stand on the side of your true values, whether in silence or through a firm refusal, you're sending a powerful signal to your brain: I am the one making the decisions. And your brain registers this not only at the conscious level, but biochemically as well. When you decline something that no longer fits, say no to an outdated expectation, or walk away from a role that has exhausted you, your body starts releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine, signals that reinforce new neural pathways, helping you form a life strategy that is more intentional, more empowered, and more aligned. And no lesson is remembered more deeply than those difficult but right choices. You don't need to say much. You don't need to cause a scene. Sometimes all it takes is one grounded, conscious shake of the head. And that alone becomes a quiet revolution within you. The outside world may not recognize that change right away, but you will. You'll notice you sleep better at night. You'll feel your heart stop racing when someone makes a request. You'll find your mind clearer, more focused, no longer drained by internal debates about whether you should say yes or not. Because by then you've established clear standards for yourself, and you no longer need to check someone else's mood before deciding what's right for you. And the best part is, this ability isn't out of reach. You don't have to be completely ready to start saying no. You simply need to recognize what in your life is no longer worthy of a yes, and then be brave enough to refuse even just once, to clear the way for a version of yourself who has conviction, boundaries, and the strength to protect what truly matters inside. No one can live your life for you. No one can give you a sense of wholeness if you haven't first chosen yourself. So the next time you feel yourself about to nod out of fear of upsetting someone, pause for just 1 second and ask, if I weren't afraid, what would I choose? And that answer is the compass you've been searching for. We grow up in a world where how much others like us is often used as a measure of our personal worth. A compliment is seen as a reward. A cold glance becomes a sign of failure. And so we learn to adapt, to please, to modify ourselves just enough not to make anyone uncomfortable. But over time, that turns you into the most acceptable version of yourself, not the truest. And you know it, because the more people like you, the more distant you feel from your own self. No one wants to be misunderstood. No one enjoys being criticized. But the truth is, every genuine growth journey passes through a land where no one applauds you. There will be moments when you must stay silent while someone attributes things to you that aren't true. There will be days when you're looked at strangely because you're no longer convenient like before. There will be people who once felt close to you who quietly drift away because you no longer fulfill their unspoken expectation. And that feeling at first is deeply uncomfortable. The brain reacts to it as if it were a threat. Your heart rate rises, your throat tightens, your stomach twists. You want to explain, to defend yourself, to clarify that you're not as bad as they think. But you don't need to do that, because your worth is not defined by other people's misunderstandings. It lies in whether or not you dare to keep living your truth, even when no one understands you. Neuroplasticity doesn't happen during moments of praise or celebration. It happens when you choose to stand firm in the discomfort of rejection. Every time you remain still in the storm of judgment, in the cold silence, in the swirl of gossip, and yet refuse to return to your old performance, that's when your nervous system is being upgraded. That's the stretch of conscious resilience. That's how the brain learns. We can survive without pleasing everyone. It's not easy to cross that threshold, but you don't need to do it perfectly. You just need to stay with yourself a moment longer instead of rushing to fix your image. You just need to learn not to react instantly to criticism. And slowly, you'll begin to notice your body no longer panics. Your mind no longer scrambles for ways to win people back. You begin to accept that not everyone has to like you. And that doesn't mean you've failed. And when you accept that, a new door opens. You stop wasting energy trying to manage how others see you. You begin to invest fully in your real life, real goals, and real connections. The relationships that remain will become deeper. The work you do will become clearer. And your confidence will no longer come from applause, but from the alignment between your inner world and outer action. So if you find yourself stepping into this unfamiliar territory where you feel misunderstood, distant, and judged, don't retreat. Stay. Because right there, you are crossing the threshold into the deepest kind of growth a human being can experience. No one is truly well when they have to exist in relationships that require them to constantly self-censor. Every conversation where you have to overthink before speaking, every gathering where you force a cheerful facade, every small act you perform, not because you want to, but because you're afraid to offend, becomes a subtle weight pressing down on your nervous system. And the cruel part is, you might be calling that harmony. You might be telling yourself that you're preserving the relationship while your body interprets it as a form of silent threat. The brain cannot recover if it has no place to simply be itself. Real healing doesn't begin with a vacation or a long meditation retreat. It begins with a safe relationship where you don't have to hide, don't have to trim yourself down, don't have to measure every word. It could be a friend, someone who listens without trying to fix you. It could be a moment when you sit with yourself in stillness without feeling anxious about not being productive. It could be a conversation where you're allowed to speak the truth without being judged as too sensitive, too blunt, or too different. Because in true connection, the nervous system doesn't brace for impact, it softens. And in that softening, healing begins. This doesn't mean you have to cut ties with everyone who doesn't understand you. It simply means this: start prioritizing relationships that nourish you instead of those that drain you. Stay close to those who make you feel like yourself. Be brave enough to reset boundaries with those who only reach out when they need something from you. And above all, choose to connect with yourself, not the version filtered through someone else's expectations, but the real you, raw, rough-edged, sometimes messy, but honest. As if you continue trading your inner truth for fleeting moments of being agreeable in others' eyes, you will never feel truly safe. Real peace never comes from being temporarily accepted. It comes from standing exactly where you are and still feeling like you're enough, whether others understand you or not. And from that point, you can begin to build connections that soothe, deepen, and strengthen the entire structure of your nervous system. We were never taught this. Every time you live in alignment with yourself, even for a moment, even with one honest sentence, one firm no, one confident yes, you are not merely making a moral choice. You are sending a biological signal, initiating a process of inner realignment. And as those acts repeat day after day, you don't just feel calmer, you become steadier, not because you are following a social script, but because you are living in alignment with the deepest structure within you, truth. There is a razor-thin line that carries the weight of a turning point, living in reaction or living by design. Reaction is when you let someone else's gaze dictate how you behave. Design is when you let your inner purpose shape your daily actions. Reaction is a gray zone filled with insecurity, where you're constantly pulled by expectations, judgments, and opinions from the outside. Design is clarity, a place where you know what matters most to you and you act from that center. You're no longer swept away by every invitation, every situation, every emotion that surfaces. You begin to live as a deliberate being with strategy, direction, and inner strength. We cannot talk about peace if we are still living on the momentum of reaction. Because reaction is always the result of an unregulated nervous system, a state where you are not truly choosing, you're merely coping. You say yes, not because you want to, but because you're afraid someone might think less of you. You stay silent not because you're at peace, but because you fear that speaking up will cost you support. And you wonder why you feel empty, vague, and lost. It's not because you lack ability. It's because all your attention is being drained into monitoring other people's emotions instead of directing your own life. Only when you pause the habitual reactions, pause the self-judgment through others' eyes, pause the adjustments you make to fit every context, do you finally have the space to ask a foundational question: how do I truly want to live this life? And that's when design begins. When you live by design, you don't have to do everything. You just need to do what's right. You don't need to be liked by the crowd. You just need to be respected by yourself. You don't need to be everywhere. You just need to be fully present where it matters most to your journey. And the most beautiful part is design doesn't require perfection. It only requires the courage to choose intentionally, to choose what is enough, to choose what needs to be eliminated, to choose what truly aligns with the vision you're building. Even as the world outside continues to push and pull, you no longer react by instinct. You slow down, you observe, you recenter, and then you act like an architect laying down the foundation of your inner home, brick by brick. From that moment, life no longer drags you along. You begin to pull life into alignment with your own rhythm. And that is the magical shift. From someone chasing approval, you become someone crafting a life worth living, where every action has meaning, every step carries weight, and every decision is an expression of awakened intent. No more wasting energy on pleasing, no more exhaustion from reading between the lines of others. Only clarity, focus, and a blueprint where you and only you hold the key. You might have once believed that living true to yourself was something grand, some dramatic turning point, a bold uprising. But the truth is the opposite. Living authentically has never been a grand external push. It is a series of quiet decisions you make each day, choices that seem small but carry the power to shape your entire life. Like when you dare to turn down an offer that drains you, when you pause amid the rush to ask yourself, is this truly necessary? When you step out of a noisy room because you no longer want to contribute to the inauthenticity, no one applauds you in those moments. but it's precisely those moments that quietly build your core strong, clear, and trustworthy. Self-respect is not a title. It is a deeply personal feeling each night before bed when you can look back on your day and know, I did not betray myself. Awareness is not about perfection either. It's the ability to notice when you're veering off course and the courage to pull yourself back without needing anyone else to witness it. Life does not require you to be right all the time. It only asks that you be honest with yourself more often enough so you don't lose your direction every time someone disapproves of you. We don't need to wait for some more ideal day to begin living our truth, not when the job is secure, not when others approve, not when we're good enough, strong enough, or confident enough, but right here, from this very moment, with one small but intentional step. Choosing silence when it's needed, speaking up when it matters, staying with your real feelings instead of pretending to be okay. Every time you do that, you are retraining your nervous system to understand true safety doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being real. And then you'll realize the miracle doesn't lie in your life transforming overnight, but in the fact that you begin to feel aligned with yourself. You no longer need to explain so much. You no longer need to strain to prove yourself. You no longer need to fill the emptiness with external attention, because fullness has begun to arrive from within, from the self. Trust you've rebuilt little by little every time you chose truth over compromise. So if there's only one thing you need to remember after everything, it's this. Life does not reward pleasant pretending. It clears the path for those who dare to be real. Not once, but every day. One choice, one moment, one small step, repeated with self-respect, with consciousness. And someday when you look back on the road you've traveled, you won't see perfection. You'll see a person who, day by day, returned to themselves. And that, in a world full of noise, is the greatest victory you could ever achieve.